My name is Steve Welch, recent author of We Are All Born Entrepreneurs, which just launched, and previous founder of Mitos Technologies, a biotech startup, as well as co-founder of Dream Adventures, a venture capital firm really designed to help early stage entrepreneurs take an idea on a napkin and get it up and running. Yeah, well, the one thing that, and the reason I kind of decided to write it is I got frustrated when I'd see people tell or sell it as if you follow these 10 steps, you'll be a successful entrepreneur. And that simply is not the case. What you see as you talk to, and I interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs, the paths that they took were so diverse. So this idea of if you do X, Y, and Z, you succeed, that's simply not the case. But what you did start to see, the more entrepreneurs you talked to, was there was a core set of skills that they all possessed, and I think that's what I tried to really focus on, was these are skills that people have developed over time, and there's something that they were able to use, and I'll go out to a couple of the key skills. One, they're all lifetime learners. I mean, successful entrepreneurs by nature have an inquisitiveness about them and are constantly seeking to acquire new knowledge. I think that was unquestionable. Two, they all had a leadership skill, and what you saw from that is it was often developed from a fairly young age, and they developed it through smaller projects. It wasn't, the guys that went on to start Audibles, Don Katz, he didn't start out his first project to start out Audibles. He, at a very young age, had tried a number of different things and succeeded in a number and failed as well. But those skills, or that practice process of being an entrepreneur, allowed him really to develop his skills. You also see, almost every entrepreneur at some point has failed. I mean, I wish I could tell you that that's not the case, but I'm trying to think if there was a single one, but very few of them had gone through and had everything be successful. Most of them had gone through a process by which they failed. But what was unique was almost every one of them took that learning or took that failure and really believed it was a learning experience, and they almost often wanted to speak about that as much as they did about their successes. And I think that's kind of a unique trait of entrepreneurs, is they see that failure process as part of the learning process, and I found it unique, and that it was tough. I mean, there are a little over a dozen stories in the book. It was hard to condense it down because, like I said, we interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs. I would. I mean, it takes practice. These skills, really, if you think about, I think there's a reason a lot of engineers are successful entrepreneurs is when you go to school in engineering, you learn how to learn. You learn basically to lay out what you want to know, all the variables you know, and all the things you don't know. And good entrepreneurs go through that process constantly. They're constantly looking at what the information they have, where they want to get to, and then laying out a path to get to that point. And that is a practice. I mean, when you're young, little kids have very simple ideas that they try to execute on, maybe, but as people get older, those ideas get more and more complex, and that ability to have the practice and try the smaller projects has a huge impact. Every industry is different, so that is a tough one. Trying to think if there was a pattern there. I don't think there was a pattern on customer acquisition. What was unique was how many of them started the business with a customer right from the start. For example, they didn't leave their first job until they had nailed down a customer. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, which is, they teach this, and I get frustrated with the MBA schools because they try to teach kids almost, part of the process is to raise money. And you see a ton of entrepreneurs that believe, they're successful if they raise venture capital, and that's the validation of them of a good idea. And I don't buy that premise. Most of the good entrepreneurs saw a paying customer as the biggest validation of an idea. And that's why you see a lot of them actually get to the point where they had paying customers or customers that were willing to invest in the business up front before they would actually, jump 2 feet into the water. Mhm. Um, every successful team, I'll start with the premise on the successful teams. The team itself was a strong team that had diverse skills. I mean, they had at least the ability to have the technology handled, the business end handled, and the sales and marketing. And I think that is critical. I can't think of a single successful business that has been able to function with just technology people or just business people. If you have just business people, nothing gets built. And if you have just technology people, often it doesn't get sold. So I think as an angel investor that's pretty active, I really focus on making sure there's a diversity of skill set within the team. The one thing that I think you see on good entrepreneurs is you see a self-awareness. And then this goes back to some of the interviews I'd done for the book, but it was amazing how many of the entrepreneurs either replaced themselves as the CEO or thought about replacing themselves as the CEO as they were developing their businesses. And I think that just shows a maturity, ability to self-reflect and say, I don't know everything at all times. And at some points in time, some point in time, I'm going to need somebody that has a different set of skills to take a business forward. And I think that you see, I'm looking for that now as an angel investor. Do I see that guy or girl that looks at the business and says, I don't have all the answers? Or even says, I may not be the best person to run this a year, 2 years, 10 years down the road. And I think that people that have that ability to look at problems tend to be more successful. Yeah, and I think that's, again, it goes by why I see so many engineers, because engineer, you kind of learn that process. It's the process of learning to learn. And I think that people that develop that skill set also become much more self-aware. I come from a more traditional background. There are much better ways to get press than we used to, which was the standard press release, and then we'd go to trade shows and try crazy things. We were notorious. The original company I started, Mitos, our goal at the biggest trade show every year was to, in essence, get in trouble. Do something that everybody at the show would be talking about, and that was our way of getting press, mainly because we didn't have any money to do much else. I will tell you the best ideas are creative, and that's why sending out a press release. There's a massive flood of information these days. I mean, that's what's the real challenge is that people are getting flooded with so much information from so many different sources. It's tough to stand out, and I think companies that go out and try something truly unique, it tend to do better with getting attention, and which results in press. Yeah. Yeah, so I worked for a company called WL Gore for a year. Gore, and people know Gore because it makes Gore-Tex. While I was there, saw an industry, the biotech industry, they really had a lot of needs. And at 23, I decided, I'd always wanted to start my own business. I determined at 23, no wife, no children, no mortgage. It was the time to find out whether I was going to fail or succeed. And the advantage of failing at 23 with none of those things is it's really not a big issue. And I'll tell you now is at 33, with a wife, children, mortgage, it's a little bit different. The basic idea was we saw a specific need in the marketplace for a new valve technology. Without getting into details, what we did was almost right off the bat, we had our customers paying for the development of the product. I mean, we clearly own the technology, but they saw enough need in the product that they were willing to fund the idea of us developing it. And okay. Mhm. Well, I saw. I mean, I was working in the industry. So while working in the industry, you saw a lot of needs in the marketplace. So I left Gore and truthfully repped what was called the manufacturer's rep for a number of products just to pay the bills. While I was developing some of the technology that we would have, true IP around. So as I got out there, we didn't have any money to develop, to make prototypes or develop a product. So we focused on two things. One, finding customers that saw enough of a need in the market, or enough of an actual product need, that they would, give at least some money for helping us develop the product. And a company called Amgen was the very first to really step up and do that. At the same time, we went to the supply chain, and we went to local companies here in the Pennsylvania area. And we said up front, we don't have any money, but we do have paying customers, or customers that are willing to help fund this. And we want to work with you and develop a long-term relationship. This is where we're trying to go as a company. And we're fortunate we found a couple local machining shops and manufacturing companies that were willing to support the product from the start. That happened in 2001, and the reason I say that is when the economy was booming, we probably wouldn't have gotten companies to come work with us. But 2001, the economy was really in trouble, and there was just so much spare capacity out there that machine shops, especially, were hungry for work. So we were able to get them on board to make the product, and long term, everybody benefited from that. The customer ended up getting a good product. We ended up being very profitable, and our supply chain ended up getting a new piece of business. So, one of the things entrepreneurs have to realize is you're not just selling to a customer. Usually you're selling to a broad array of people, everything from investors to customers to vendors to even your own employees. It was basically a cold call. I mean, I had met people, and I did more cold calling my first couple of years than you can imagine. So it truly was a cold call until we were able to send them drawings that we developed, CAD drawings, and a very, very brief presentation of this is the value we think this will bring to you. And from that, we got engaged in meeting, and they were interested in the product. Oh, yes. I mean, I would spend my first year. I would be shocked if I wasn't spending 40 hours a week just cold calling. Yeah, you get. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you get the good thing about cold calling, especially when you do it a lot, is you learn a process. You learn who you're. The most important thing usually is who are you looking for. I mean, who's the buyer, who's the decision maker, and for us, the decision maker wasn't the purchasing person. They don't care. It was the process engineer that had the real problem. The process engineer, we were selling against a competitive product that had a high failure rate, and there was somebody in every plant that failure made their life miserable. So we had to find the person who's made that failure made their life miserable, and they were willing to talk to us about an alternative. So they didn't always. It was different from every company, but typically we were looking for process engineers, people that were involved in process improvement, because they would know where the high failure rates of the alternatives were. But a lot of that came from learning. What's that? No, after yes, the start, yes, but after you get a couple of names, we used a program. It'd be equivalent to what is now called High Rise. It was called ACT, and we documented any person we would talk to, any name we could get from that person inside their company or another company, and then it's a much easier cold call to say, hey, I just talked to Gabriel Weinberg. He suggested I give you a call. So cold calling is an acquired skill that gets better with practice as well. Yeah. That's right. And then we cut a deal with them where we took 50% up front to develop the product. Actually, excuse me, I got to watch that. We did get a prototype made. They looked at the prototype. they looked at it and they said, "This stinks." I mean, it's funny is they're almost their exact words were the first prototype. This just isn't going to work. But we said, all right, well, what would you need to change about this? And they listed, 3 to 5 things, that core items that had to change in the product. And we went back to them and we said, well, if we change those 3 to 5 things, would you pay us, would you buy this product and would you pay for it up front? And they came back and they said yes. So they paid, it was like, at the time, I think it was 60 valves. I mean, it was not a huge number of valves, but they put 50% up front, and that allowed us to go to the manufacturer, make the changes, and then start producing the product. At least a dozen. The biotech industry is relatively small. The big players within it, there are only a handful. So we had contacted, and we were running a lot of different parallel companies at the same time. Months, yeah. Yes, yes. And in the meantime, what we were doing was we had found complementary products that so our product was a valve. We were trying to sell products that would be complementary to that other people were making. So we were basically just buying and reselling. But that enabled us to do two things. One, pay the bills. That's pretty important. But two, it also allowed us to develop contacts within the industry that also would see the need for our product. Yeah, and they actually became one of our biggest advocates. The neat thing about them being involved in the development process was they felt ownership in the product. I mean, so they had a pride associated with saying, "Hey, it was called the free flow valve. This is the Mitos free flow valve. We helped develop it." And they would go to trade shows and give talks, technology seminars. They would talk about the product. Without question, the first couple of years, our best salespeople came from Amgen, and the best thing that happened to us was a lot of them actually left Amgen and went to other companies. It was. I think that market has changed dramatically in the last decade. But 2001 through 2005, the biotech industry, that was the best way to get the customers. There's no question. We benefited from the big trade shows. Mhm. No, I wouldn't say less successful. Once it allowed us to really scale the product and really get attention. It's tough. The cold call to really scale cold calling. I mean, it was we hired a sales engineer, a good friend of mine, Charles Meadows. He was the best cold call guy you'd ever seen, and relationship guy. So he built relationships, but two guys really selling out there doesn't get you to the mass, amount of people out there that could buy the product. Trade shows really enabled us to do that. So, I mean, we did crazy things. We had a scavenger hunt. We couldn't afford a booth. One of my favorite stories. We couldn't afford a booth at the one show in New York, the first year we wanted to go. So we had a scavenger hunt going around the show to different suppliers, different complementary products. We brought other companies into it and had a very successful. I'd argue more people were talking about our scavenger hunt that we didn't pay a cent for than all the people that had paid $25,000 for a booth. But again, it sometimes not having any money forces you to be creative. We didn't have an option at the time. We started to bring in manufacturing. It was clear our business model required us to control the manufacturing process, and not everything, but not machining, but our injection molding and a bunch of other manufacturing processes. As we brought that in, that really allowed us to increase our ability to offer customer service, and we ultimately continued to grow because we developed a model to have clearly the ability to customize product very easily and have an incredible customer service and turnaround in an industry where that had a lot of value. Now, 20 years from now, that probably won't be there. I mean, there's, as you know, as markets evolve, there's different times where an industry has different needs, and we just happen to be at a time where the ability to customize had tremendous value to the industry. No, not once. not once. Now looking back, it's embarrassing. We were a brochure online. That's all we were. Yep, and a better product. I mean, I will tell you, we had a product that it had. First of all, it's protectable. We had by the time it was done, I think we had 6 patents around that product and a bunch of ancillary products that clearly had value. I think that's one of the things that I'm really trying to stress with entrepreneurs now is um, have a definable value means a lot. Just because something's neat, and you see entrepreneurs all this time that have come up with a neat idea, just because something's neat doesn't mean it adds value to a customer. And I think that's one of the things to really focus on early stage in a business is what is the value that this brings to the customer. Yeah, I think that number one, we should have. Looking back, just knowing what I know now, that it would have been a good return on investment. Um, the people the models that are enabling you to get much more efficient at marketing are incredible. I mean, I just recently ran for Congress. Unfortunately, I'm not running for Congress anymore. But it was clear that our best form of advertising, dollar for dollar return on investment in our campaign, was Google and Facebook. There's no question about it. The ability to really target market now has increased dramatically. I mean, you can go in a campaign, for example. I could go on Facebook and everybody that likes Sarah Palin, you could target those people with a very specific message where you just wouldn't have been able to do that, 5, 10 years ago. Yeah, and I think that's not only for the customers. I think that's for internal people. I mean, it is for your team. If you had asked, hopefully, anybody at our company what Mitos did, they would say provide the best or most reliable custom systems at a competitive price. Okay, so that was our line. Everybody inside knew it. Everybody outside knew it. And I think that is critical. It also it not only just for the marketing standpoint, it refines what you're trying to do. It's so easy in a business it's growing. There's so many ideas. Everybody's throwing around ideas. It's easy to get sidetracked. And by having kind of that core marketing message of who you are, what you're doing, it helps guide you in trying to determine priorities. That's, I'm a big fan of, and Steve Barsh, who I think you've had on the show before, is the best I know at this. It really laying out what are the core assumptions of a business. Um, and it's important for a business to understand them themselves because you constantly need to measure yourself. But often what you find is people are focused on measuring the wrong thing. They're not looking at what the root cause of issues are. And I'm trying to think of a good example of it. I apologize, I'm not coming up with it. But what you really, people often talk about, our revenue's gotten growing fast enough. But you dig that in, your revenue growth probably doesn't come, or there's 1,000 things associated with that revenue growth. But what are the core things that really amplify that or detract from it? And I think that good entrepreneurs find those things, find those key points, and I think that good angel investors help them find that. I think the one thing I'd like to believe is that when I have gotten in deals, and I'm probably not as good at this as I used to be, but I'm able to bring value to the company in other ways by helping them look at those core assumptions. And because once you figure out what those core assumptions are, that's where you should be spending your time. But and again, in a growing business, it's so easy to get sidetracked. If you aren't laying that out methodically, it's hard to make sure you're still hitting it. Yeah. It, yep, I get that a lot. Yeah. What's funny about that is, so the first thing I do if I'm kind of the first step in looking at a business, whether to invest, is to say, I want to talk to some of your users. What has shocked me is, as you just said, some of them are like, well, we haven't really talked to any of our users. I mean, that maybe that's the, the good news and bad news about an internet is you can have a customer that you don't know. And that causes problems sometimes. So I think that the most important, a business doesn't work without customers. And the most important thing anybody can do is make sure they understand their customers and understand why their customer values them, because that will allow them to really, target other customers that see that same value. Sure. Dream Adventures, I'll do a shameless pitch. Dream Adventures, the application process is open right now. The advantage of Dream It, to give you a little background how it came about, David Bookspan and Mike Levinson came up with an idea. They presented it to me. I said, your idea is awesome. How do I join? But the real concept was looking at Y Combinator had really started this market, but we saw some improvements to try to bring people together that had an idea and give them all the resources they need to fail or succeed with as little capital as possible. So the model is, you get 3 months, you get a mentor, which is a been there, done that entrepreneur that has ownership in the fund. So they have vested interest in seeing the company succeed. And then you have donate legal, donate accounting, and the ability to hire other people. So we also accept applications for what we call strategists, which are often business people, technology people, and try to partner those together to create good teams. Because as we said earlier, one person certainly can't do it. You need a strong team. So I think we've done created a unique model where we're trying to bring all those resources together to help really catapult businesses forward. So if entrepreneurs have good ideas, apply now. Whether it's Dream It, whether it's Y Combinator, these are great programs. I know people are often concerned about the small percentage of equity they give away in this process, but we talk to our customers and people that have gone through the program, and I think you'd see undoubtedly they would agree that the value proposition is there, and they're glad they went through the program. Yeah, and last year I think we had 44 entrepreneurs working in an open space at the University Science Center, and you get cross collaboration of ideas from that process. And at the end of our program we have our demo day, where last year there were 200 venture capitalists and angel investors. You got the pitch to in one day. I mean, going back to cold calling, can you imagine how long it would have taken to cold call all 200 of those VCs and angels? It just wouldn't have been possible. And by going through this program, you have the ability to present to all of them, and ideally you have multiple interested. And the best way to increase your position is to have leverage. And I think these programs enabled entrepreneurs to succeed, but also at the end of the program to be in a position where they have leverage. Gabe, thanks for the time. See ya.